This is Miss Anna, and today I want to talk directly to the men living inside a sexless marriage. Because a lot of what gets said to you about this situation is either too simple, she just stopped caring, or too vague to actually help. Communication is important, without ever explaining what that communication should actually contain. I want to give you something more useful than either of those. Here is the first thing worth understanding clearly, because it will change how you interpret everything else. For most women, desire does not usually work the way yours probably does. Yours is often spontaneous, arising on its own, sometimes out of nowhere, requiring very little external setup to activate. Hers, for most women, is more commonly responsive, meaning it tends to arrive after connection and arousal have already begun, not before them. This is not a malfunction, and it is not a reflection of how much she loves you. It is simply a different system, and understanding this changes the entire question you should be asking. The question is not why isn't she spontaneously wanting this the way I do? It is what conditions does her desire actually require in order to activate at all, and are those conditions currently present in this marriage? The most common condition that quietly disappears in a long marriage is active, ongoing emotional connection. Not the connection you built once at the beginning and have been assuming still holds, but connection actively renewed. In the early stage of your relationship, you are almost certainly doing things you no longer do without thinking about it. Real conversation, focused attention, small, unprompted gestures that communicated you saw her specifically, not just the role she plays in the household. If most of your daily interaction now runs on logistics, schedules, kids, chores, brief updates, without much left over that feels like genuine attention to her as a person, that shift alone can be enough to quietly shut down a desire system that depends on feeling actively wanted, not just formally married. The second thing worth understanding is mental load, and this one is uncomfortable. So I'm going to say it plainly rather than soften it. In a significant number of marriages, even ones where both partners work full-time, the invisible cognitive labor, tracking what the kids need, remembering appointments, anticipating problems before they happen, managing the household's endless open loops, still falls disproportionately on the wife. That labor does not clock out at bedtime. A mind that has been managing dozens of things all day does not shift easily into the relaxed, present state that desire actually requires. If you consistently experience her as too tired or too distracted for sex, it is worth honestly asking whether you have examined what she is actually carrying that you are not, rather than simply concluding that the tiredness is really about you. The third thing is resentment, and it is often quieter and less conscious than either of you realize. Unequal division of labor, feeling unseen or unappreciated, minor conflicts that got smoothed over instead of genuinely resolved, all of it accumulates. You do not need a major betrayal for resentment to build. Years of small imbalances, never directly addressed, do the job just as effectively, and resentment, even mild resentment neither of you would immediately name if asked, is one of the most reliable things that shuts down desire. It is very hard to want to be physically open with someone toward whom some part of you is still quietly keeping score. The fourth thing involves how sex itself has been treated inside your marriage over time. If she has learned, even without either of you meaning for this to happen, that declining sex reliably produces tension, a wounded reaction, or a subtly worse mood from you, then sex has likely stopped functioning as something she wants and started functioning as something she manages to avoid conflict. That shift, obligation replacing desire, is one of the most effective ways to kill a woman's interest in sex that exists. And it usually happens gradually enough that neither of you notices exactly when it occurred. The fifth thing is physical, not psychological, and it deserves to be named directly because men frequently personalize it when they should not. Hormonal changes around childbirth, breastfeeding, and perimenopause can significantly and legitimately reduce both desire and physical comfort during sex, for reasons that have nothing to do with you or the relationship. A lot of women going through these changes feel confused or even ashamed of their own reduced desire. And a lot of husbands, not understanding the physiology involved, quietly conclude the decline must be about them specifically, when it may not be at all. Now, here's the part that requires you to look at yourself honestly, because this conversation is not useful if it only explains her side. Ask yourself directly whether you have been pursuing genuine emotional connection with her consistently, or whether you have mainly been hoping the desire will simply return on its own if you wait long enough or bring it up occasionally when frustration builds. Ask whether you have taken real ownership of household and mental labor, or whether you have assumed things were roughly equal without actually checking. Ask whether, when she has raised frustrations in the past, small or large, you responded with genuine curiosity or with defensiveness that quietly taught her that raising things costs more than it is worth. These are not comfortable questions, and they are the ones most likely to actually change something if you are honest with yourself while answering them. What tends to actually work in marriages that do rebuild physical intimacy after a long decline is rarely a direct campaign focused on sex itself. It starts further back, with rebuilding real emotional connection deliberately, the way you built it at the beginning, rather than assuming it maintains itself automatically over years. It requires an honest, non-defensive conversation about where resentment or imbalance may have quietly built up, addressed directly rather than glossed over again. And it requires you to understand that her desire, for many women, is not something to wait around for. It is something that can be actively cultivated through consistent safety, attention, and genuine connection, deliberately rebuilt rather than assumed to already be there because it once was. If you are in this situation right now, the most useful question is rarely, why has she stopped wanting this? Asked as an accusation, even silently, in your own head. It is closer to, honestly, what has changed in how connected, seen, and unburdened she actually feels with me day to day, and whether you are willing to hear the answer without getting defensive, because that willingness is usually the actual precondition for anything changing at all. I want to hear from the men watching this. If you are living through this right now, have you asked her directly, without defensiveness, what would need to be different for wanting to feel possible again, or has the question mostly stayed unspoken between you? Tell me in the comments. And one honest question for you specifically before you answer that comment. If she described honestly what changed in your marriage over the years, would her account of what happened match the account you have been quietly telling yourself? This is Miss Anna, and I will be back with more of what nobody else will say. Subscribe if you are ready to keep hearing it.